You know, I gotta be really honest, I don't know why I changed this, because you can't see it. Hi! It's so good to see you again. I'm so glad I'm back to making videos. If you are a subscriber, you would know I've been MIA for like a month because I moved and a lot of stuff was happening, but I am so glad to be back. I'm just gonna do a very quick intro. My name is Cameron. I make videos about books and reading and everything like that, and I went on a little hiatus, but I am now back, so you will be seeing videos from me every Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, so I'm hoping to be making more. I'm hoping to be back to making shorts, stuff like that. All that to say, this is the recap video for the second Harry Potter, The Chamber of Secrets. If you have not seen the first video in this series, you should watch it. It explains a lot of things if you've never read the series. Ellie, as always, Ellie, who is my little sister, as always, edited this video. She did such a great job. I hope you really enjoy watching it. And yeah, that's all I really have to say to you. You'll be getting a video from me next week about why it took me so long to make another video. And just so you know, this video was recorded about a month ago in my old apartment. So now we're in the new apartment. The other one is in the old apartment. So if you're concerned about consistency or anything like that, I promise it's all good, it's okay. And yeah, the next recap for this series will be out next month, so keep an eye out for that. I'm so glad to see you all again, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye! Okay, so let's get started on the second book. The second book is called Chamber of Secrets. Harry is 12. As soon as Harry gets home from Hogwarts, in like the last book, Vernon takes all of his stuff and locks it away in the cupboard under the stairs. Like, all of his magic thing. He puts a little lock on Hedwig's cage too, so she can't fly around. And basically Harry is like forbidden to mention anything about magic, to do anything regarding magic. He's just kind of like closed off from the rest of the world. And he also hasn't seen or heard anything from his friends. He does suspect it's because Hedwig is like locked away. Like obviously he can't send anything to them because Hedwig isn't allowed out. But he's not receiving anything from them either. So his summer is just kind of a big bummer. We get to his birthday, his 12th birthday, as previously mentioned. And on that birthday, Vernon has like kind of a big business dinner. He's going to have some potential business partners come over. It's a husband and wife come over, and they're gonna serve him dinner and see if like Vernon can sell some of the drills, because he's also in the drill business. It's not really relevant to the plot, but they say it. So Harry is basically told, we don't want to see anything from you, we don't want to hear anything from you, you need to stay up in your room quietly. He goes upstairs before the dinner, and when he walks into this room, he finds a small creature, only about 2 feet tall. He's got big ears, a long nose, big eyes, and he is known as a house elf, and his name is Dobby. He is hanging out in Harry's room when Harry gets upstairs, and Harry's like, hi, who are you? So, what is a house elf? A house elf is a creature that's like magically bound to a family to be their slave. So slaves were written into the Harry Potter universe. Yeah, anyway, this Dobby doesn't say who he's bound to, but he does go on to be like, hey, you're in danger. If you go back to Hogwarts, like nothing good is going to happen to you. Like, don't go back to Hogwarts. Harry's like, I've literally dealt with dangerous things before and I'm fine, so I'm definitely going back to Hogwarts. And then Dobby is like, well, no one wants you there. Your friends haven't been sending you letters. And Harry's like, what do you mean? How do you know that? How do you know my friends haven't been sending me letters? And Dobby reveals he's been like stopping Harry's mail. Harry's like, give me my mail, and Dobby goes, well, I'll give it back to you if you promise not to go back to Hogwarts. And Harry's like, I'm literally not gonna, what is this? I'm literally not gonna do that. Dobby's like, well, you're gonna have to catch me, essentially. And Dobby runs out of Harry's room. You know the room he's supposed to be staying in while this business dinner is happening? That one. So Harry chases him downstairs. Dobby levitates a big dessert that Petunia made and basically explodes it and frames Harry for it. And then like, boom, vanishes away. At the same moment, an owl comes like swooping in and is like, basically delivers this letter that's like, Harry Potter, if you use magic again, you're going to get expelled, because underage wizards aren't allowed to be using magic at home. Harry, all summer, has been holding it over the Dursleys' head that he can, like, curse them whenever he wants, so they've been leaving him alone. But now that Vernon has found out that Harry's not allowed to do magic, Vernon is like mad because he lost out on that business deal. He locks Harry in his room, puts a little cat door on the door so they can give him meals that way, and bars his window. Let me just remind you, this is a children's book series. Yeah, Harry's locked in his room. He starts getting fed 1 meal a day. He's allowed out once a day to go to the bathroom, and he's basically trapped there. And he doesn't get the letters from Ron and Hermione because, you know, Dobby said goodbye. After a few days of this, Harry is woken in the middle of the night by someone knocking on his window. Who could that be, you say? It's Ron! It's Ron and his 2 twin brothers, Fred and George. They're like, hey, we're gonna bust you out. And Harry's like, I'm on the 2nd floor. How are you knocking on my window? And it's because they're driving a flying car, the Ford Anglia, something like that. They're driving a flying Ford. And so they pull the bars off Harry's window, come in, and take all of his magic stuff and put it in the car, and then they fly off with Harry, and the Dursleys are like, ah, curse you, Harry Potter. They fly the car all the way home. On the car ride, Harry is like telling Ron, Fred, and George about Dobby and like his visit and what's like mean. And Fred is like, I think someone's probably playing a prank on you. Like, do you know anybody who's like mean enough to want to play a prank, like threatening you not to come back to Hogwarts? And immediately Harry and Ron are like, Draco Malfoy, that guy sucks. When they get there, Mrs. Weasley is waiting there, and she is mad. She is mad that they stole their father's car, and she's also mad at Mr. Weasley because that car is not supposed to fly. Mr. Weasley bought the car because he was like, I just want to check it out, and then he chanted it to fly. So Mrs. Weasley is not happy with anyone, but she is like, hi Harry, I'm so glad you're here. Make yourself at home. But anyway, they're at the Weasley house. They call it the Burrow because it's a big English thing to name your house like that. Also, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you their names. Mrs. Weasley's name is Molly, and Mr. Weasley's name is Arthur. Molly is really mad that Arthur enchanted the car, but now that Arthur is home, he's like, Harry, you can stay for the summer, which is great. Harry is excited to not be at the Dursleys anymore. A few weeks later, after Harry's been there for a few weeks, living life as a wizard for the first time in his life, their Hogwarts letters arrive, and it's got all their book lists and all the supplies that they need, and notably, the list of books is like way longer than it normally is because it's a bunch of books written by a guy called Gilderoy Lockhart. Ron is like, I guess we've got a new female Defense Against the Dark Arts professor because apparently Gilderoy Lockhart is a hottie, so he's like really big with the ladies. They get a letter from Hermione and she's like, hey, I'm going to Diagon Alley this day, we should meet. And they say, yeah, sure. So they travel by Floo powder, which is a powder you throw in the fireplace and it makes the fire turn green, and then you can transport yourself through the green fire to another fireplace. Harry attempts to do it and does not say where he wants to go clearly enough, and gets sent to a shop called Borgin and Burke's. Borgin and Burke's is a dark magic kind of store, like they sell dark artifacts essentially. So Harry's just here, and he sees Draco Malfoy and his father Lucius. Draco and Lucius come into the store, and Harry hides so they can't see him, and Lucius is talking about like how he has to sell this artifact because the Ministry keeps conducting raids because Arthur Weasley keeps being like, this guy's a bad guy. Arthur is not wrong because obviously he's selling a dark artifact. So he sells it to Mr. Borgin, I think, one of the owners. So they leave, and Harry finally is able to like slip out and finds he is in an alley called Nocturne Alley, which is like notoriously a place where like a lot of dark wizards hang out, and there's like a lot of shady stuff. And while he's down there, he runs into Hagrid, who is buying flesh-eating slug repellent, which is not something that's on the market in like the safe wizarding areas. But anyway, he sees Harry and he's like, Harry, what are you doing in Nocturne Alley? Let me walk you up to Diagon Alley. We're like right next door. So Harry explains the whole thing about Dobby to Hagrid, and Hagrid is like thinking the same thing, like, oh, someone just sent their house elf to play a prank on you. So they get back to Diagon Alley, and Harry reunites with the Weasleys and gets to see Hermione again, and they all go shopping for their school supplies. So when they're going shopping for their school supplies, they get everything, and then they have to go to Flourish and Blott's, which is the bookstore, obviously, to buy their new, 75 books. And when they arrive, they see that there's a book signing being done by Gilderoy Lockhart. And they're like, Mrs. Weasley, who's a fan, she thinks he's a hottie also, is like, oh, we should get a signature. And they're waiting in line, and while they're waiting in line, Gilderoy Lockhart sees Harry, and he's like, oh my gosh, Harry Potter came to my book signing. We're both famous. Let's take a picture together. And they took a picture, and Gilderoy's like, this will be really good for your exposure, Harry. And anyway, at this book signing, as they're taking a picture, Gilderoy's like, what Harry doesn't know is I'm going to be his new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. So that's a mystery solved. And so they get their books. Lockhart gives Harry all of his books free of charge. Harry is kind of just like, okay. They are about to head out. Ginny is in her first year. Ginny, Ron's little sister, is in her first year of Hogwarts. So she's getting all of her books. She's got a cauldron in her hands. And before they're about to leave, Draco is there. And Draco's like, wow, I thought you guys were too poor to buy all of these books. And he's also like, Harry, I know you love fame. So he's being a bully. And Ron and Harry are about to square up with him, but then Arthur and Lucius walk up, and they have beef. They have, you know how I mentioned Arthur was, conducting raids on the Malfoy's house? The dads come up and they're, defending their sons or whatever, and then Lucius makes a comment about Molly Weasley's weight, and Arthur loses it, and they start fist fighting in the magic bookstore. They're fist fighting each other, and all of the books go flying, and there's a bunch of craziness, and then Hagrid reappears and is like, you guys are adults and you should stop fighting. So they collect all of the books they bought. Lucius has one in his hand that he just dumps into Ginny's cauldron, but he's basically like, watch your back, Arthur. And they leave. And everyone returns to the burrow. Hermione is with them now. On the day that they have to go to King's Cross Station, September 1st, the Weasleys are running extremely late. They get in the Ford Anglia, they start driving, and then someone forgets something, and they start driving, and someone forgets something, and they start driving. They're running so late. So they get to the barrier. They're about 2 minutes before the barrier closes. Everyone goes through, they're passing through. Ron and Harry are the final ones. And when they try to run through the barrier to get to platform 9 3/4, they are stopped. The barrier closes itself a few minutes early. So they miss the train. Harry is like, oh no, how are we gonna do this? And Ron has the idea, hey, we all drove in the Ford Anglia. Why don't we just fly it to school? And Harry's like, great idea, because they're both 12-year-old boys, and they don't really think, period. They don't really think. So they fly the Ford all the way to Hogwarts, and as they're following the train, and they're just minding their own business, and as they start getting closer to Hogwarts, the Ford starts protesting. As previously mentioned, the Ford starts protesting after they're getting pretty close to Hogwarts. It's losing altitude, it's making bad noises, and the boys are not able to get control of it. They arrive on the Hogwarts grounds and crash into a giant tree. But not just any tree. This tree is called the Whomping Willow. And it whomps things that get near it, aka the tree hits back. You hit the tree hits back. During the crash, Ron's wand snaps in half, almost. It's barely hanging together by a little sliver of wood. The car fights its way out, because it's magical, and then proceeds to kick everything out of it. It expels the boys and their trunks and Hedwig, and drives off into the Forbidden Forest. So Ron's like, oh man, my dad's gonna be so mad at me, I lost the car. The car drove off. And they go up to Hogwarts, and they're coming in with all of their stuff. And who approaches but Snape? And Snape's like, interesting, you guys are expelled. If it were in my power to expel you, you guys are expelled. I'm getting your head of house. He's like, stay in my office. So he goes to get McGonagall, and McGonagall arrives and is like, what the hell was that? She's like, you guys were spotted by a bunch of people. We're not going to expel you. Lucky you. You are going to receive detention, so that's something you're going to do. And you're definitely not allowed to do that again. Next time you should just write a letter. And Ron and Harry were like, oh yeah, that was probably a good idea. And McGonagall summons a little bit of food for them and makes them go to bed, and they don't get to join the feast because McGonagall's like, we're not gonna celebrate you guys crashing into the Whomping Willow. The following day, Ron gets a howler, and a howler is a letter that yells at you. really, really loudly. He gets a howler from his mother, and she's like, how dare you steal this car, like, wildly irresponsible of you, you could have put yourself and Harry in danger, blah, 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 blah. So everyone hears that. Then they go to their first class of the year, which is herbology, which is just magic plants, taught by Professor Sprout, and they learn how to repot mandrakes, which are like little screaming plant creatures. And they're repotting them, and they learn, oh, mandrakes are really great for fixing curses. You may not think that's relevant, but it will be relevant later. Gilderoy Lockhart runs into Harry a few times and gives him tips on his fame, and Harry very quickly is like, oh my gosh, this guy is unbearable. They go to Lockhart's first class, and he brings a bunch of like Cornish pixies and then releases them and makes everyone catch the pixies while he like dips out. So not a good teacher. An annoying guy and not a good teacher, according to Harry. Harry goes to his first Quidditch practice. Ron and Hermione are like, we'll join you, like, we'll watch in the stands. So he goes to his first Quidditch practice, and the Gryffindor Quidditch team is there, and who arrives but the Slytherin Quidditch team with special permission from Professor Snape to practice at that time. What do they arrive with but a new seeker, Draco Malfoy, and a bunch of brand new brooms. Nimbus 2001, so they're better than Harry's. And the whole team now flies better. And Harry immediately is like, Draco bought his way onto the team. Like, Lucius paid for all of these. Everyone exchanges insults because Gryffindor doesn't like Slytherin. And while they're exchanging insults, Ron and Hermione come up. Hermione makes that kind of jab of like, I mean, at least Harry didn't have to buy his way onto the team. And Draco turns around and calls her a mudblood. A mudblood is a wizard slur for someone who is Muggle-born. And so, of course everyone gets mad. Like, you can't be a 12-year-old boy who drops slurs on a 12-year-old girl. Like, that's not the game we're playing here. Yeah, everyone's mad. Ron tries to curse Malfoy. You remember how his wand is, like, pretty much broken in half? Yeah, it backfires. It casts a curse on himself, and he starts throwing up slugs. Harry and Hermione are like, Hagrid's hut is right nearby. They take Ron there, kind of recap the story for Hagrid. And that's where Hagrid tells them, like, hey, mudblood is fully a slur. Hagrid's really upset, but they're, like, checking in with Hagrid. It's their first visit with him this year. And Hagrid shows them his giant pumpkins. And Harry's like, I think, like, he's not allowed to use magic, as we learned in the previous book, but I think he's casting spells on these pumpkins. Ron and Harry go serve their detentions. Ron has to go polish trophies in the trophy room. And Harry is requested specially by Gilderoy Lockhart to go sign fan mail, which makes Harry so happy. He's so happy. But while he's serving this detention with Lockhart, Harry hears like a voice that's like, rip, tear, kill. And he's like, what the heck? He goes, Professor, did you hear that voice? And Professor Lockhart's like, what are you talking about? And Lockhart's like, that's enough for tonight, go to bed. So Harry's like, that's weird. I'm hearing voices that saying it wants to kill. In October, this is like a month or two later, Harry is like coming in from a really like muddy Quidditch practice, and he runs into Nearly Headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost. And Nick is like talking to him, and Nick seems upset, and he's like, oh, I tried to join the headless hunt, but they won't let me because I'm not fully headless, I'm just nearly headless. And Harry's like, man, that sucks. And Filch arrives, and he's like, Harry, you're tracking mud everywhere, I'm gonna write you up. So they go to Filch's office. Like, while they're down there, Peeves, the poltergeist, starts, like, destroying stuff. So Filch has to leave to go deal with that. And when Harry is down there by himself, he sees a letter from, like, a quick spell learning course, essentially. And finds out that Filch can't cast magic. And when Filch comes back, he's like, you were touching my mail. Get out of here. So Harry leaves, and he runs into Nearly Headless Nick again, and Nick was like, how did that go? I convinced Peeves to go destroy something so we could, like, break you out. And Harry's like, he didn't even write me up for a detention. Went great. And Harry's like, I wish I could make you feel better, Nearly Headless Nick. And Nearly Headless Nick is like, why don't you come to my 500th death day party on Halloween? And Harry's like, sure. Yeah, I'll bring Ron and Hermione. Sounds great. On Halloween, The trio all go to Nick's death day party, his 500th death day party. They are introduced to, well, Hermione already knows her. There is a ghost of a former student who lives in the girls' bathroom on a certain floor. Her name is Moaning Myrtle, so Ron and Harry meet her. And they're talking to her, and she's very sensitive. That's why she's called Moaning Myrtle. And Peeves comes up and starts bullying her, so she runs off crying. Floats off crying. Yeah, they're like, this party's kind of a bummer. We're gonna go upstairs now. So they're heading back to the Great Hall when Harry hears that same voice. That's like rip, tear, kill. He's like, oh my gosh, I hear that voice. It's headed in a direction. We're gonna follow it. And Ron and Hermione are like, we don't hear anything, but okay. So they follow it. And when they arrive, they stop hearing the voice and they find a hallway that's flooded with water. And when they go down that hallway, they see Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, tied up by her tail, frozen, tied up by her tail, and words that look like they're written in blood that say, the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Air is in like H-E-I-R, not A-R-A-I-R. So they walk onto this essentially crime scene, and all of a sudden the feast in the Great Hall gets let out, and a bunch of the students like walk in and see these three standing here looking at this. And Draco Malfoy, unprompted, is like, Mudbloods are next. And everyone's like, huh? So, the entire student body is there, so the professors arrive. You've got Dumbledore, you've got Snape, you've got Filch, you've got McGonagall, and you've got Lockhart. Filch is immediately like torn up because Mrs. Norris is his favorite girl. I mean, she's his cat. If that happened to one of my cats, I would be deeply upset. Harry immediately is like, Harry did it. Harry knows I'm a squib. And a squib is a person born into a magical family that cannot use magic. Oh yeah, Filch doesn't do this in front of the entire students. The teacher take Harry to, I think, Lockhart's office. Dumbledore is basically like, Harry couldn't have done that. Harry is 12 and doesn't know the magic to be able to do that. Which everyone goes, yeah, okay. Fair. Harry is 12. They are concerned that Mrs. Norris is dead, but Dumbledore's like, and Mrs. Norris is just petrified. She is still alive. We can heal her once our mandrakes are full grown. The next day, Harry notices a Hufflepuff student who he met in herbology, Justin Finch Fletchley, starts avoiding him. And he's like, that's kind of weird. And Justin is also a Muggleborn. So he's like, kind of weird that Justin is avoiding me, but, you know, whatever. Hermione is like, the Chamber of Secrets. I have to go do research about it. Because that's Hermione's response to everything, is just doing research about it. Not an invalid response. I think a lot of people could benefit from actually doing research every once in a while. So Hermione can't find anything. So they are in History of Magic with Professor Binns. Professor Binns is a ghost. He's the only ghost teacher. Yeah, it's not relevant to the plot or anything, but you should know he's old. During History of Magic, they're there. Binns is like notoriously boring, and Hermione raises her hand and is like, what can you tell us about the Chamber of Secrets? And Binns is like, it's just an old legend, like it's stupid. And the students are like, but you should tell us anyway. And because they're the most interested they've ever been in his class, he's like, all right, fine. And he tells them that there is a legend that Salazar Slytherin, the guy who created the House of Slytherin, had a falling out with the other three founders of Hogwarts. This is not relevant, but here are their names.
Godric Gryffindor, Helena Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw.
He had a falling out with the three of them because he believed that only students that came from magical families should be allowed to be admitted into Hogwarts. And when the other founders disagreed with them, he was like, fine, peace out, and left the school. When he left, he sealed the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, which allegedly has like a big terrible monster in it. And the legend goes on to say, like, when one of Slytherin's heirs returns to Hogwarts, the chamber will be opened again. But of course he's just like, that's just a legend. There's no basis in it, despite the fact that it was written in blood on the walls. But that's an aside. So, after class, the trio goes back to the area where they saw Mrs. Norris, and they start kind of looking for clues. And while they're looking for clues, Hermione spots, like, a trail of spiders, like a bunch of spiders walking in a line, like ants, leaving Hogwarts. And she's like, that's weird. And in that moment, we find out that Ron is, like, severely scared of spiders. Like, one of his biggest fears is spiders. But Harry, while they're there looking for clues, talking about Ron's fear of spiders, Harry is like, the hallway was flooded. we are right near Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Let's see, because Moaning Myrtle floods the bathroom every time she gets upset, and Peeves was bullying her that night. So Harry's like, "What? Let's go see if Moaning Myrtle has seen anything." And they try to stop by, but she doesn't want to answer them. She thinks they're bullying her. She's a lot. The trio ponders, like, who do we think the heir could be? And immediately Harry's like, well, it's Draco. Draco hates Muggleborns and hates squibs. And Hermione is like, interesting, we should figure out from word of mouth. What we need to do is we need to impersonate other Slytherins so we can get into the Slytherin common room. And I know the perfect potion to do that with, the Polyjuice potion. So they kind of formulate this plan that they're going to use Polyjuice potion to turn into some other Slytherins and find out from Draco himself. They use Lockhart, who is an idiot, to sign off on getting that restricted book that has the Polyjuice potion, like, recipe in it. And he signs off on it, so they get the potion, and they find out they can do it in about a month's time, but they need to steal some supplies from Snape's personal stores. And then the other thing they opt to do is they opt to make Polyjuice potion in Myrtle's bathroom, because no one ever goes there because Myrtle is annoying. So the next day is Harry's first Quidditch match of the year against Slytherin. But during the game there is a bludger. You remember those flying balls that try to hit you and knock you off? There is a bludger that will not leave Harry alone. I don't know if it has eyes, but it's got its eye basically trained on Harry and will not leave him alone long enough to catch the snitch. They try to call like a timeout to be like, what's wrong with this bludger? But Harry's like, we just need to finish this game. And he's like, I'll handle the bludger. You guys go back to what you're doing. You don't need to be distracted by this. And Malfoy, while they're up there, because Malfoy's also playing Seeker, is like heckling Harry. And Harry spots the snitch right above Draco's ear and goes and catches it. But while he's on his way, the bludger like comes and breaks his arm. But he catches the snitch, so they win. When he hits the ground and he's like, my arm is broken, Lockhart is like, oh, I got this, and makes all of Harry's bones in his arm disappear. Why is that a spell? Actually, now that I think about it, it's probably like a kitchen spell, but like, why would you use that in a medical situation? So Harry has to go up to the hospital wing, where the head like nurse, Madame Pomfrey, is like, what the heck is this? I have to regrow all the bones in your arm now. You need to stay overnight. And so while he's staying overnight, he is awoken by Dobby. And Dobby is like, I tried to tell you not to come back to Hogwarts. Dobby also admits that he was the one who closed the barrier to platform 9 3/4 so that Harry and Ron had to take the car. And he also admits that he was the one who enchanted the bludger to go after Harry, because he's like, I mean, if you're grievously injured, they're of course going to send you home. Dobby also mentions that he's risking a lot trying to help Harry, and he implies that he's getting severely beaten in his house. But he also is like, Hogwarts is so dangerous with the Chamber of Secrets now being open. Harry is like, how do you know that, Dobby? And Dobby's like, I can't talk about it anymore, and then disappears. Also, his disappearing is like a magical thing. He disapparates, which apparition is just teleporting, essentially. So he teleports out of there. While Harry is spending the night in the hospital wing, and everyone kind of thinks he's asleep, a new body, a new petrified body, the first body of a student, is brought up to the hospital wing. And it's a little first year named Colin Creevey. He is a huge fan of Harry Potter. He's been bringing a camera around with him. And they're like, we think he was trying to sneak up here to see Harry. And he's petrified, and he was looking through his camera. So the camera is like totally destroyed. Harry's bones grow back. Once we get near Christmas, the trio realizes that Draco is actually staying at Hogwarts over Christmas, and they're like, that's the perfect time to interrogate Draco. There's not going to be anyone in Hogwarts during the Christmas holidays. So they go ahead and make it. In between that time and Christmas, Lockhart and Snape put on a dueling club. Harry learns the disarming spell, which is Expelliarmus, which isn't really relevant to like this book, but it becomes super relevant to the rest of the other books. So he learns Expelliarmus here. And he is paired with Draco to do like a mock duel. Like, everybody look at them, they're doing a duel. Draco casts a spell that makes a snake appear, and the snake goes after Justin Finch-Fletchley. And Harry's like, hey, snake, stop it. And the snake stops. And everyone's like, because Harry didn't say that in English. Harry said that in snake language, because he can talk to snakes. Harry finds out that he is a parcel mouth, which means he can talk to snakes. Snakes. Harry's like, oh, I'm sure lots of wizards can do that. And Ron and Hermione are like, the last person who was known to do it was Slytherin. You really look like Slytherin's heir right now. So then the whole school is like, Harry can talk to snakes, he must be Slytherin's heir. Harry, the next day, is like, I have to explain to Justin that I wasn't like trying to send the snake after him. I was trying to get the snake to stop. He goes looking for Justin, and he stumbles upon a group of Hufflepuff students being like, Justin is hiding because he's concerned that Harry is gonna get it. And Harry's like, well, that's just stupid. Why would I be the heir of Slytherin? My best friend Hermione is literally Muggleborn. And so he angrily leaves the library, which is where he was, and he comes across the petrified bodies of Justin and nearly headless Nick. Because apparently ghosts can be petrified. So Harry is immediately blamed, naturally, and McGonagall ushers him and the bodies up to Dumbledore's office. And when he is up there, he kind of gets left alone for a minute, and he sees Dumbledore's pet bird that looks like it's dying just erupt into flame. And Dumbledore comes back in and he's like, you're fine. He does it all the time. He's been looking like garbage recently. He's needed to do that for a while because he's a phoenix. He has to catch on fire and be reborn, essentially. At that moment, Hagrid comes in and he's holding a bunch of dead roosters because something has been killing his roosters. And he's like, Harry didn't do it. And Dumbledore's like, I literally know that, Hagrid. And Hagrid's like, never mind, I'm going back downstairs and I'll wait my turn. So, Dumbledore asks Harry, like, hey, is there anything you want to tell me at all? You, at this point, have found 2 bodies. Is there anything you want to tell me? And Harry's like, no, don't worry about it. Christmas arrives. The Polyjuice Potion is ready. Ron and Harry find a way to get Draco's best friends, Crabbe and Goyle. They get, like, pieces of their hair, because you need a body part to become someone in a Polyjuice Potion. Kind of gross. But they basically drug Crabbe and Goyle with some treats and take their hair and leave them in a broom closet somewhere. So they get those hairs. Hermione was up against a Slytherin girl in dueling club, so she grabbed one of her hairs off her sweater. So they take the Polyjuice Potion, and Ron and Harry turn into Crabbe and Goyle, but Hermione's like, go on without me. Go figure out what's going on with Draco. So the boys go down, they go to the common room, they talk to Draco, and Draco's like, it's a shame I don't know who the heir is, because if I did, I would help him. So it's not Draco. Draco does mention that he knows the last time the chamber was opened was 50 years ago. So they're like, interesting, good to know. So they rush back to Hermione after they find out that information, and they find that Hermione, who thought she grabbed a hair from the Slytherin girl, grabbed the Slytherin girl's cat's hair. So she's turned into like a weird human-cat hybrid. So she has to spend a month in the hospital wing. When Ron and Harry are going down to visit Hermione one day, they hear Filch yelling about the flooded hallway again, and they're like, somebody made Moaning Myrtle upset. Let's go check on her. And Moaning Myrtle's like, someone threw a book at my head, and I'm mad because people are still bullying me. I died and people are still bullying me. Which, I can't say she's wrong. So Ron and Harry see the book that was thrown at her, and Harry is like, I'm gonna grab this. When Harry picks it up, he's like, oh, this diary belonged to T.M. Riddle. That's not anyone I know. But he never wrote in it. Like, there's no entries. So Ron is like, hey, when I had that detention, I was cleaning those trophies. There is a big trophy for services to the school that is for a T.M. Riddle. And it's from 50 years ago. And Harry's like, interesting. This guy would know about the Chamber of Secrets. A few months later, Valentine's Day, Lockhart is like, the school needs a morale booster, even though, like, a lot of students at this point have gotten petrified and everyone's kind of frightened. And he sets up a singing telegram kind of situation. When Harry is stopped for a singing telegram, he, like, tries to get away, but the little gnome that's singing it rips his bag, and, like, all of his stuff spills out, including T.M. Riddle's diary. And Ginny was the one who sent the singing telegram, because she's got a big old crush on Harry. She's just an 11-year-old girl, and that's so cute. And Malfoy makes fun of her and is like, haha, he's never going to pay attention to you, you're too poor. and picks up the journal, and Harry is like, give that to me, and snatches it, and then he leaves. So after this whole thing, because for some reason wizards still write with a quill and ink, the ink jars that Harry had shattered and got ink all over everything, but Harry notices that T.M. Riddle's diary is like unharmed, and he's like, that's a little weird. So he decides to write in it, and he sees like the ink in it disappears, and he's like, oh, weird. And he writes a little thing that's like, my name is Harry Potter. What's yours? Because he's like, maybe it's one of those magical books that like responds back to you. And he's right. So the diary responds, and it says, hi, I'm the diary of Tom Marvolo Riddle. And Harry is like, hey, you were alive during the Chamber of Secrets. What do you know about it? And Tom is like, actually, I was the person who caught the guy who opened it last time. And Harry's like, yo, that's crazy. So Tom offers to show Harry the memories, and Harry's like, yeah, sure. So he gets like transported into the journal where he sees Tom talking to the former headmaster, and Tom's like, can I stay for the summer? And Dippet's like, we might actually be closing Hogwarts permanently because of this whole Chamber of Secrets thing, so no, you cannot stay for the summer. And Tom is like, so if we catch him though, maybe I could? And the headmaster's like, I mean, maybe. So Tom heads out of there. We see a young Dumbledore who's like suspicious of Tom, and we don't know why. Tom goes and catches someone holding a box with like a creature in it, and is like, stop, you're caught. But the creature busts out of the box and leaves. And Harry, in this memory, realizes that who he's watching getting caught is a young Hagrid. And he's like, oh my gosh, Hagrid opened the chamber 50 years ago. Harry gets out of the journal, gets out of the memories, and immediately tells Ron. So the trio discusses Hagrid's potential involvement, and they know, like, Hagrid tried to get a baby dragon last year, and he also had a giant three-headed dog. He loves big monsters. Like, it's not totally impossible. And Harry recalls, like, wait a minute, when I saw him over the summer, he was in Nocturne Alley, which is like a notoriously shady place. Maybe he's got something shady. And Hermione is like, why don't we just go ask Hagrid? And they're like, ooh, probably not the best idea. So they decide not to. So one day, Harry gets back from classes and goes into his dorm and finds that his dorm has been like ransacked. It's only his stuff. Like, people have clearly been rooting through it. Like, a bunch of stuff is destroyed, and he's like, that's crazy. And the one thing he notices is missing is Tom's diary. And he's like, someone came and snatched Tom's diary because they didn't want me finding out any more stuff. The following day, the Quidditch match was supposed to happen, and on his way down, Harry hears the rip, tear, kill voice again, and the Quidditch match gets cancelled. McGonagall comes and finds Harry and Ron and is like, come with me. She takes them up to the hospital wing, and there they find a Ravenclaw girl and Hermione. And Hermione's holding a little mirror. And they're like, oh no, it's got Hermione. And the boys are like, okay, now that it's got Hermione, we really need to go talk to Hagrid. So they go down, they talk to Hagrid. They go down in the middle of the night with the invisibility cloak. By the way, I feel like I should add. Hagrid is like really visibly like shaken up. And they're down there for a minute before someone knocks on the door, and Hagrid is like, hide. Dumbledore arrives with the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. And the minister basically is like, Hagrid, we found you, like, suspicious of this last time. Like, it's why you got expelled. We need to place you under arrest. We don't know what's happening. We think it's you again. They are going to place him under arrest, and then they're going to take him to the wizard prison Azkaban. And just then, Lucius arrives. Lucius Malfoy, Draco's dad, arrives, and he's like, the board, because he's a governor of the school, so he's like a board member. He's like, the board of Hogwarts has actually called for your resignation, Dumbledore. So now we've got a scenario where Hagrid is getting arrested and Dumbledore is being like forced to step down. Dumbledore's like, I'll go willingly. And before he leaves the hut, he is basically like, help will always be given at Hogwarts if anyone asks for it. Like, he says it to this hut, and both the Minister of Magic and Lucius are like, who's he talking to right now? And Hagrid, like, kind of gets Dumbledore's drift, because he thinks, like, hey, Dumbledore's figured out that these two are here. And Hagrid is like, if somebody wants to find something, all you need to do is follow the spiders, and leaves. Now Harry and Ron are like, Dumbledore is gone, there's going to be so many more attacks. So now they're down Hermione Dumbledore is gone, Hagrid's in prison, like a lot of stuff is happening. Several of the Hufflepuffs approach Harry and they're like, hey, we know it's not you. Like, we're really sorry for accusing you of it, but now that we've heard Hermione is petrified, like, we know it's not you. Sorry about that. And in the same class, because they're all in herbology together, Harry and Ron see a trail of spiders again. And they see the trails going down to the Forbidden Forest. So, they decide that night they're going into the Forbidden Forest. They go get Hagrid's dog Fang out from the hut because they're like, Fang hasn't been let out and he might be able to help us. So they go get Fang and the three of them all head down to the Forbidden Forest. And while they are down there, they find a giant spider called Aragog. And Aragog is like, I was the creature who Hagrid had 50 years ago, but I was not the Chamber of Secrets creature. I'm just a little guy. He's not a little guy, by the way. He's a giant spider. And the creature is like, Hagrid was taking care of me while I was a baby, and everyone suspected I was the monster, but I wasn't. The actual monster is something extremely, extremely terrifying. Spiders do not like this monster. That's why spiders are all leaving Hogwarts, is because they're like, get me out of here. They're like, what is the monster? And Aragog is like, I'm so scared of it, I can't say. And Aragog is like, anyway, I'm gonna eat you now. I'm gonna send all my, like, sons and daughters to eat you. And they're like, what? And he's like, I mean, you might be friends of Hagrid, but, like, Hagrid's not here. So these spiders all try to eat them. And guess what comes out of the Forbidden Forest to protect them? It's the Ford! The Ford is here. It's been living in the Forbidden Forest by itself. It's all dirty and gross, but it's just been driving around in the Forbidden Forest. So, the boys get in the car, and the car drives them out of the Forbidden Forest, and they're safe, yay! The boys now have confirmation that Hagrid didn't do it, though. So, they've kind of got to figure out, okay, what is the creature that the spiders are super, super scared of? But they also have confirmation, because during that conversation they talked about other things, they have confirmation that the only person to die in the first round of attacks, so the time Chamber of Secrets was open 50 years ago, the only person to die was a girl who died in the bathroom. And they go, we know someone who died in the bathroom, and they go visit Moaning Myrtle. Despite the fact that security around the school is now super, like, upped, everything is under heavy security, students must be escorted to their next classes so no one gets, like, attacked, essentially. They sneak away from the class, and they're caught by Professor McGonagall, and they're like, we just wanted to visit our dear friend Hermione. And McGonagall's like, okay, that's okay. Nobody's been allowed to visit the victims for, like, months now at this point, and they're just like, we just wanted to visit Hermione, and McGonagall, like, feels really bad for them, and she's like, okay, I'll take you up to see her. So, when they get there, they see Hermione. She's got a mirror in one hand. In the other hand, she's got a ripped piece of paper. So they, like, jimmy it out of her hand, and they pull it out, and they find an excerpt on the monster, the basilisk, which is a giant snake that spiders are terrified of. It can only be killed by the crow of a rooster. So remember, Hagrid's roosters were all dying. And the basilisk kills people who it looks directly in the eyes with, but only petrifies people who it doesn't look directly at. So, if we remember, Mrs. Norris was in a flooded hallway. There's a good chance she saw its reflection in the water. Colin Creevey was looking through his camera. Justin looked through Nearly Headless Nick, and Nearly Headless Nick got, like, the full brunt of it. Nearly Headless Nick also is already a ghost, so he can't die. And then Hermione and the Ravenclaw girl were looking in the mirror together. So everything is making sense. And it being a snake is why Harry hears a voice that's like, rip, tear, kill, blah, blah, blah. And Harry is like, this is so right, but how's it getting around? Hermione wrote a little note that said pipes, question mark, because the snake has been slithering around in the pipes in the building, which is why Harry is hearing the voice in the walls. Something that I think I didn't mention. Harry also pieces all of these pieces of information together, and it's like, okay, so the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is definitely a basilisk. Ron and Harry also figure out that the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. So they run to go tell McGonagall, but they don't find her because they find out that the basilisk has taken a student into its lair. It's Ginny. They find out that the basilisk has taken Ginny into the chamber, and there are words written in blood, once again, that say her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever, written on the wall. They also kind of figure out that the blood is not like the blood of people, it's the blood of roosters that have been killed. So the professors are all like, oh my gosh, we have to deal with so many things. Somebody has to go try and get Ginny. And they're like, oh my gosh, who's our defense against the dark arts teacher who's been doing all of these great things? Like, he writes all of these books about all of these amazing things that he accomplishes and people he saves. Well, that's Professor Lockhart. So they're like, Lockhart, go deal with this. The boys kind of overhear this, Ron and Harry overhear this, and they're like, we'll go tell Lockhart what we know so he knows what he's dealing with. They go up to his office and they're like, Professor Lockhart, we want to tell you something. And Lockhart is packing up. He is fully planning on leaving, being like, I'm not dealing with this, someone else is. And they're like, why aren't you taking care of this since you've taken care of all of this other stuff? And he admits, like, well, I mean, I've been taking other people's stories and like modifying their memory because if I'm writing the story, it's gonna sell much better because I'm cute. Anyway, I'm so good at memory spells because I've been doing this for so long. So now I'm gonna erase your guys' memory now that I've admitted that. And he doesn't get to because Harry uses the disarming spell that he used earlier and is able to get his wand, and he catches the wand and throws it out a window. So they're like, Lockhart, you're coming with us, buddy. So they go down to where they suspect the chamber is. They get to Myrtle's bathroom. Harry is like, how did you die? And she's like, oh, I'm so glad you asked me, because weirdly that's the thing she's prideful about. She is like, I was crying in the bathroom because someone was bullying me and I saw these giant eyes staring at me and that's the last thing I remember. And she's like, I saw the direction of the eyes coming from that sink over there. So they go over to the sink over there and Harry speaks parcel tongue, which is snake language, at the sink, and he's like, open, and the sink opens and they have found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. So they enter it and they find themselves there and they see a giant snake skin, and Lockhart pretends to be terrified. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, and falls to his knees and then wrestles Ron's wand out of his hand. And he's basically like, I'm gonna tell everyone that it was unfortunate that we didn't save Ginny, but I was able to pull you guys out and you had permanent brain damage. He's got some convoluted plan like that. And he tries to cast a memory spell on the two of them, but he's using Ron's wand, the one that got broken in half and has been not working pretty much the entire year. So the spell backfires and it causes an explosion and causes the ceiling to collapse. Ron and Lockhart are on one side and Harry is on the other. So Harry is like, Ron, are you okay? Is Lockhart okay? And Ron's like, yeah, we're both okay. And Harry's like, I'm gonna continue on and try to rescue Ginny. You try to find a way out of here and like let someone know what's going on. He moves forward into the chamber and finds Ginny's body. Ginny is not dead yet, but she is like barely alive, like within an inch of her life. And while he's like checking her out, making sure she's like, well, Tom Riddle is there. You know, that teenager from 50 years ago? He's there. And Harry is like, are you a ghost? Have you like been here this whole time? And Tom is like, well, I'm a memory, but I'm being kept alive by the diary. He basically is like, I've been able to become physical since Ginny started like pouring her heart out to me. He is like, by the way, I was the heir of Slytherin. I made up that whole Hagrid thing so I didn't get in trouble. I was the heir of Slytherin 50 years ago. And now he's been possessing Ginny to be doing the exact same things. Tom basically was like, but I was like way more interested in you. Like I heard about all these like 11-year-old girl problems, but when I saw your name, I was way more interested in you. He's like, the most interesting part to you is the fact that you defeated the greatest dark wizard of all time, Lord Voldemort. And Harry's like, Voldemort was like way after your time. And Tom was like, was he though? And then he writes out Tom Marvolo Riddle and like rearranges the words to say, I am Lord Voldemort, dun dun dun. And then he's like, I'm gonna kill you now. So this memory of Voldemort is trying to kill Harry, and he summons the basilisk. And the basilisk like starts chasing Harry, and Harry like closes his eyes and he's like, I need help. And who arrives but Fawkes the Phoenix. Did I tell you that Dumbledore's Phoenix's name is Fawkes? So Fawkes flies in and he's got the sorting hat. And it's just the bird and the hat. Riddle is like, you only have a bird and a hat. That's literally embarrassing for you. But Fawkes is a brave little guy and goes up and like scratches the basilisk's eyeballs out. So the basilisk doesn't have its biggest weapon anymore. It's still a huge snake and could definitely eat Harry if it tried, but it doesn't have its eyes anymore. So Harry is able to like successfully fight the thing, maybe. Harry tries to put on the sorting hat and is like, oh my gosh, I need help. And when he puts it on, something thunks him in the head, and it's a big sword with a bunch of, what are the red gems? Rubies. Rubies. So it's a big sword with a bunch of rubies all over it. And he uses that sword to slay the basilisk, but unfortunately he does manage to get like caught by the basilisk's fangs, which obviously are venomous and are going to kill Harry. So he is dying, essentially. He does defeat the basilisk, but he's dying. And Fox, the little phoenix, comes over and starts crying on his wound. And apparently, phoenix tears can heal any ailment, which is sick. And Tom's like, what? I didn't kill you? And Harry's like, yeah, but I can get you. And just decides to stab the journal with the basilisk fang. And he does so, and Tom disappears. And Ginny wakes up and is like, oh my gosh, what happened? Harry and her are able to leave. And Fox basically like picks them up because phoenixes are also strong. Phoenixes, turns out, just have like whatever powers J.K. Rowling wants them to have. But the phoenix is very strong. So it carries Ron and Hermione out of there, and they arrive and they find Ron and Lockhart. And they're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And they're like, Ron, are you okay? Ron's like, I'm fine. But Lockhart seems to have jacked up his memory, and like Lockhart doesn't remember that he's a professor or who he is or anything like that. So it's pretty bad. He's got brain damage. But anyway, the four of them leave the chamber. When they get back upstairs, they go to Dumbledore's office and they find Mrs. Weasley is there, because like she literally was just told like her child is dead, essentially, but now her child is alive. So Mrs. Weasley is there. And Dumbledore has returned, and Harry goes on to tell like the entire story, what they found out, everything like that, and Dumbledore is basically like, well, good news, the mandrakes are finished, we've brewed the potion, and all of the victims are returned to normal. So Ginny says that she's been writing into the diary since the beginning of the year when she found out, no sir, just found it slipped into her school supplies. Dumbledore sends everybody away, like slowly. They're like, Weasleys, go to the hospital wing, take Lockhart with you. So it's just Dumbledore and Harry. Dumbledore sends everyone away, and he and Harry are talking, and Harry, like very quickly, he's been plagued by this idea throughout the entire book that he was like destined to be in Slytherin all along. Dude, because the sorting hat essentially told him like when he was being sorted that he would do really well in Slytherin too. And then combined with like he speaks to snakes and a bunch of stuff like that, he is like really concerned that he is like Voldemort. And Dumbledore's like, you're literally not though. Like, you're definitely a Gryffindor. Bravery is very clearly like your thing. He also says the sword that you pulled out of the hat was actually Godric Gryffindor's sword, and only like a true Gryffindor is able to wield it. Dumbledore does go on to be like, well, the only Parselmouth I've ever known besides you has been Voldemort. So I wouldn't be shocked when he was trying to kill you if he gave you some of his powers. Which is like, that's a crazy lore drop, I feel like. When they're talking, Lucius Malfoy shows up, and he shows up with his house elf, Dobby! And he's like, Dumbledore, why have you returned to your post? Like, the governor's very clearly kicked you out. And Dumbledore's like, huh, that's interesting, because the other governors wrote to me immediately after the last attack happened and told me to come back because they were just bullied into this decision by you. And Lucius has like nothing to say. He's like, ooh. Harry confronts Malfoy after like Dobby's kind of hinting at him the whole time, like he's gesturing to Malfoy. And Harry, like, kind of pieces it together that Malfoy was the one who slipped the diary into Ginny's school stuff. You remember during the fight when he, like, picked up a book and returned it? He slipped the diary in with one of those books. And he goes and confronts Malfoy. And he's like, I know what you did. And Malfoy's like, you can't confirm that, though. And they turn to leave. And Harry is like, hey, Dumbledore, can I return this journal to him? And Dumbledore's like, okay. And he takes off his sock and puts his sock on the diary. And he's like, hey Malfoy, you want this back? And Malfoy's like, why would I want this? And throws it to the side along with the sock. And guess who catches it? It's Dobby. Fun fact about house elves, they can only be freed if they are given clothes. Something I forgot to mention when I was explaining what a house elf was. So, technically, Malfoy has just given Dobby clothes. So Dobby is now a free elf. So Malfoy tries to attack Harry because he's like, you just lost my house elf, and tries to attack Harry, and Dobby's like, no, and uses some of his little house elf magic to defeat Malfoy. Malfoy leaves, and Dobby is like, hey, don't ever try to save my life again. You've put my life in danger so many times this year. And Dobby agrees with that. So, Harry and Ron are both awarded 200 house points. Gryffindor wins the House Cup again. Hermione is returned to normal. And Hagrid returns from Azkaban, and his entire record is clear now. And Hogwarts finishes another year.